talked about trust, and you also talked a lot about ethics. COVID has changed and put a lot of that into place in terms of a company's values and how also a business needs to adapt to significant changes that are happening in the market. So, what have you seen the best CFOs do in adapting to a pandemic over the last 18 months?
Yeah, there's two where I've really seen them excel, and it is strategy and leadership, and communications under the leadership. And I don't know, we somewhere along the line people picked up the word pivot in 2020. I don't know if you guys use it overseas as well, but it's like I can't go an hour without using the phrase pivot 3 different times. But a lot of companies simply had to reposition their business model because it wasn't going to work during COVID or after COVID. And CFOs are on the front line of that, because not only today are they great strategic thinkers, but they do understand the strategy. And the other thing, unless you're on those 1 in 100 companies where the CEO is a former CFO, you're probably the only financial expert on the leadership team. And that's such an invaluable thing during a crisis like this. So I think they've been on the front lines, really challenging, the strategic assumptions and repositioning their company. Because what we've learned from history is that if there's a global crisis, if a company thinks that they can just sort of roll up into a fetal ball and wake up when the crisis is over, you're very unlikely to survive that way. It's the companies that innovate and rethink and challenge assumptions that are going to emerge stronger after the crisis. And CFOs are a critical role in that. And then the other thing, Joyce, is a lot of them are involved in leadership. And, I mentioned the whole ethics and trust thing, and that plays into it. But there were 2 surveys that I read within about a week of each other. Individually, they weren't that interesting, but, together they were. And the first one said basically, it asked people, what institution do you trust the most? And this was in America, but it's probably valid across the world. And people identified their own employer. It wasn't that they trusted, the corporate world generally, but people trust their own employer. And that was even ahead of like religious institutions and the president and, government and the media and other things. So where you work is the place you trust most. And then there was another one, which was global in nature. Who's the person at work you trust the most? And overwhelmingly, it was CFOs. So if you put those 2 things together, what a responsibility you have as a CFO, because you're the most trusted person at the most trusted institution for your employees. And, that goes a long way during a crisis. CFO being up there front and center, talking not only to employees side by side with the president, but, talking to customers, investors, suppliers, whoever it might be. And if your company's big enough, maybe the, society as a whole, people want to hear from the CFO during a time of crisis. So I think those are the 2 that I've seen the most, the greatest change.